Now this episode, the investigation by South Australian Major Crime Branch into investigating Harry Phipps. You can be the judge if you think this investigation was managed well or not. Before we get into why myself and Bill believe this investigation was I'll give you an overview of what sometimes police or detectives must deal with and work with. See, I was a teacher for several years, and in that time I worked with talented can-do professionals who rocked up to school early and left quite late. They were committed and dedicated, organised kids' events, went on excursions and regularly attended parent-teacher nights with no excuses, and overall were very involved. Others I worked with did an okay job, more like foot soldiers, not too much, not too little, but they assisted when asked. Then there were the teachers who were in 8:59 a.m, just before the morning school bell rang, and they were out the door smack on 3, basically before the children. They took their full complements of sick days, study days, etc., and lived for the school holidays. And at the hint of being called out, they were off to the unions. But they were also smart, and they were certainly front and centre at important meetings or events if there was a district inspector, union official or parliamentarian present. They could play the game superbly well, but at the site of work would do the bare minimum. Now in my and Bill's opinion, the police force is no different, where some law enforcement officers are more hung up on their title, where their egos enter the room before they do. Hey, look at me, Mum, I'm a detective. Or like some teachers, they will hide from work and make laziness an art form. They're doing the bare minimum to get by, where if breathing required effort, they would have been dead a long time ago. Or as Thomas Edison, an American inventor and businessman, once stated, most people miss the opportunity because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work. However, even though these types of characters are in the minimum, it does give the overall police force at times a tainted image. And let's not forget the words of Tom Cotton, an American politician, attorney, and former military officer. Police officers put the badge on every morning, not knowing for sure they'll come home at night to take it off. Bill Hayes and I understand law enforcement around the world is a demanding and very challenging job, regularly trying to carry out their sometimes onerous duties while under-resourced. Many detectives investigate numerous cases simultaneously, where a balancing act must be performed. Which one takes priority? Is one crime more important than another? What are the chances of a crime being solved in a reasonable amount of time? Do they have necessary tools at their disposal? Are they working under strict budgetary guidelines? And we should all understand these types of investigations are not carried out as they are in a fictional TV crime series where the evidence conveniently falls into place and the crime is neatly solved within an hour's viewing. In real life, the police are not paid actors, nor do they have a script at their disposal. Also, a definite conclusion to a case is not always achieved. For the most part, law enforcement officers are professionals carrying out their sometimes thankless duties under very trying circumstances. Now, as a detective with the South Australian Police Force for more than 10 years, Bill Hayes experienced many and varied events within the force that he would not wish upon the public. He has seen how these situations have affected some of his closest colleagues over the years. Bill and I collectively say thank you to our police officers and appreciate the work you do. However, being mindful that police have a difficult job, it is fair to say that on a global basis, a minority of abduction and murder investigations would appear to have been mishandled. Investigations carried out look to have been inadequate, even incompetently conducted, shoddy or even amateurish, and in the very worst cases, very deceitful. Detectives covering their trail, allegedly planting and tampering with evidence or allowing evidence to go missing. Leads not followed up and protocols not adhered to. Facts distorted to suit the narrative and discount the bleeding obvious. Lies that have been perpetuated and attitudes becoming increasingly unshakably stubborn in the face of the obvious, all culminating in writing questionable and slanted reports.
Bruce and Denise Morecambe, front and centre, walking into the final chapter of what has been the largest criminal investigation in the history of Queensland. The disappearance of their son Daniel in 2003. They always believed police should have zoned in earlier on their son's killer, convicted violent paedophile Brett Peter Cowan, and State Coroner Terry Ryan agreed, finding more could have been done to focus on Mr Cowan in the early stages of the investigation.
The Morecambe family had considered that Queensland Police, in hindsight, could have done better.
Cowan was in the area and had holes in his alibi, but he wasn't arrested until 2011 after a complex covert operation that saw him confess. Tape lifts from Cowan's car weren't tested for 8 years, the coroner saying they should have been prioritised and the subject of much earlier examination.
In our opinion, the Major Crime Investigation Branch, members that carried out the investigation into Harry Phipps and his alleged involvement into the disappearance of the missing Beaumont children, sadly appear to have at least some of these similarities. Our reasons for saying this and much more new information is in the upcoming book, Unmasking the Killer of the Missing Beaumont Children, Chapter 26, The Police Investigation. Now, when I met Bill in July 2008, I had briefed and shown him the information that I had unearthed to that point. Bill listened impassively and commented that what I had said was worth investigating. However, something that he did say I will never forget, and from that point I knew that I had the right investigator to work with. Now, he told me that if he became involved, that he would be trying to disprove everything that I had told him. He said that this was so because this was the kind of scrutiny that the information would have to face when it was presented to the police and to the public. Also, he had to be fair to all those involved on both sides of the story. I was impressed with his balanced attitude.
Former Adelaide Police Detective Bill Hayes reviewed the Beaumont files in his time in the force. The authors of The Satin Man asked Bill to conduct a proper independent investigation of the book's claims, including questioning Mr Phipps's son.
I feel that perhaps he does know a little bit more than what he told me.
The son believed the children were taken to the Castorloy factory and were most likely buried in a sandpit, a claim Bill says can no longer be easily dismissed by the police.
This could be one of the last pieces in that jigsaw that we've been building.
Now, we also spoke about where do we go to from here? Well, who do you think were the first two people Bill said that he would need to meet and interview before becoming committed to the investigation to ascertain their truthfulness? You got it, Hayden and Angela Phipps. Yet, as far as myself and Bill are aware, no detective within the South Australian Major Crime Investigation Branch ever met and interviewed Angela, who had sent a detailed letter to Major Crime, and as far as we know, this letter was never responded to. Why? This letter is shown in full in the upcoming book, Unmasking the Killer of the Missing Beaumont Children, titled Angela's Letter, Chapter 14. Now, so well written is this letter, the publishing company did not need to edit any of it. You tell me and Bill, she is not being truthful. So why was she never met and spoken to? I mean, Angela was so important to this case mounted against Phipps, having been married to Hayden Phipps for several years. She knew about her husband being allegedly sexually abused over many years by his father, Harry Phipps. Hayden's sleepless nights and hypervigilant when touched when sleeping, and the many hospital stays. His addiction to prescription medicine, alcohol abuse, and coupled with a death wish mentality. That Angela was aware Harry was a big tipper, and speaking with relatives and Hayden over the years, she gleaned he was well known to hand out and tip in £1 notes to the mid-1960s, and that's when decimal currency took over. And remember that Jane, Anna and Grant were given a £1 note by the man they met at the beach. It was a pivotal piece of information in 1966, and it has been ever since. Now you tell me if that's a coincidence or not, but detectives for some reason did not feel it was necessary to talk to her. Why? Could it be that her statement messed with their already decided preconceived thoughts regarding the case against Phipps' involvement? And they would be not told how to solve a case by an upstart such as myself or a former detective like Bill Hayes. Now, to add insult to injury, Hayden Phipps was never met and interviewed by detectives either. Yet Hayden stated he saw Jane, Anna and Grant Beaumont in his backyard that fateful day, January 26, 1966. And this is backed up by Steve Van Aperen, arguably Australia's #1 polygraph expert, who, after listening to Hayden's recorded interview with Bill, said that Hayden is being truthful but hiding more, exactly as Bill had said immediately after interviewing Hayden. And also, what about the international polygraph experts? They said exactly the same thing.
So how much credence should we place on Hayden Phipps' story? Internationally accredited polygraph specialist and former policeman Steve Van Aperen has no doubt he was truthful after analysing a recording of an interview conducted by retired major crime detective Bill Hayes, an independent investigator for the Satin Man's authors.
I can only test on factual information. I can't test on a feeling, a thought, an opinion or a belief. I can only test on black or white.
Yet the heads of major crime investigation branch continually say that their investigation into Phipps was thorough. Really? We call on that. It simply was not. As Bill says, mistakes were still being made. According to Bill, one of the most damaging mistakes was the treatment of Hayden Phipps and the surprise, unwelcome phone call made by a Queensland and South Australian detective, as is discussed in detail in the upcoming book. Now, this was despite Bill Hayes' previously near 3-hour interview with Hayden that took 6 months of careful negotiation to organise. Also, a warning or advice, if you like, was given to the South Australian detective by Hayes that Hayden was in a delicate state and not to get some big-booted Queensland detective to go booting down Hayden's door. He further offered to act as a go-between for the South Australian police to speak with Hayden. Of course, this advice was ignored. What would we know? And what does Hayden do straight after he received this unexpected call? He phones his closest cousin and says, "Who in the fuck does this detective think they are? I have said all I want to say to Bill and I don't wish to discuss over the phone." He then emails his former wife Angela, and I'll repeat part of what he sent. The full account you can read in the new upcoming book. "Everything I told you about him was the absolute truth. I have been questioned, interrogated, tape recorded, phone called from Adelaide, and I had all sorts of high-ranking officers try to trick me into what I have said and not said." Now, did anyone notice I had all sorts of high-ranking officers try to trick me in what I said and not said? Now again, one must wonder what detectives are writing in their reports. Could they again be slanted to suit a particular narrative? What were they saying to Hayden? One must wonder. And look how this officer treats an alleged victim of child sexual abuse. It appears with a flippant attitude. And sadly, it seems, a predetermined belief. So in the end, how can this be a thorough investigation when you have never met and interviewed the two most important people in this investigation? That's right, you cannot. My God, one must ask what the heck is being written in their reports. According to Bill Hayes, this did not follow standard policing procedure and in his opinion was a grave miscalculation. If detectives did meet them, only then could they make a valid judgment one way or another and whether to proceed or not. And this is what happens when major crime get pushback from some parts of the SA media, namely former investigative journalist, now SA politician, Frank Pangello, law enforcement, becomes tongue-tied.
Why wouldn't you dig up that
Because
area?
the evidence doesn't support that.
What evidence?
The evidence that we've been provided with does not
What, the
support
eyewitness accounts?
If detectives had attempted to build a solid rapport with both Hayden and Angela, the initial outcome might have been very different. Now, the foundations of this report could have been built by asking for Bill or my assistance, as both Angela and Hayden trusted us. And why not interview Mostyn Matters, the last of the Glenelg detectives who was at the Glenelg station that fateful day? He met and spent quality time with Hayden in Cairns, northern Queensland, where Hayden lived and Mostyn was holidaying at the time. Now, Hayden took a shine to Moss, where after they spent some quality time walking the lovely waterfront of Cairns and enjoying lunch together, I drove Moss back to his hotel, where he stated to me, "My God, he is telling the truth, that's for sure. He saw those children in his backyard, I have no doubt at all. He was so clear." What was also noticeable was what he said to Mostyn had not deviated from what he had said to myself and Bill over the years. Now remember, if you're going to lie, you better have a very good memory, but liars rarely do. However, the same detective who previously told me I was beating my head up against a brick wall and chasing my tail, well, I was chasing a tail, and what an intriguing tale it has become. This detective also stated to brothers David and Robin while overseeing the first factory dig at the Casterloy factory in 2013, "My mind is made up in all this." Really? Yes, really. Then if this is the case, what hope do the people of South Australia have of a proper and thorough investigation into this enduring mystery? Zilch. Now also, if this is the case, what is this cold case detective writing in his reports to his superiors? One could ask, are his reports slanted to suit a certain preferred narrative and cast aspersions on myself and Bill's investigations? Also, maybe to cover their behind. Overall, Bill Hayes took the view that until otherwise disproved, Hayden Phipps was sexually abused and did see the Beaumont children in his backyard that fateful day, January 26, 1966.
From the information we've been given, he was a man who he was a pedophile, according to his son, his eldest son. He was a man who engaged in serious deviant behaviours.
So let's go through some of this investigation in no order in particular. Now, regarding the A4 size note posted on the main Maringi Avenue front gate at the Casterloy factory in early 2016. Now, that was commemorating the 50th anniversary of the children's disappearance, as you can see here. Now, this note was discovered by a senior employee who took a mobile phone photograph before contacting Major Crime. They were immediately paid a visit by the same cold case detective that I had interesting dealings with. The employee presented the note, which the detective took with him. Question: do Major Crime still have this note? If so, were fingerprints and DNA taken for forensic evidence? Also, according to a senior Casterloy employee that we had spoken to before the second factory dig in February 2018, they met new senior detectives on the case, and he asked what they thought of the note found on the front gate. In his words, their response was a little surprising, as these detectives appeared to have no knowledge of such a note. Once the phone image was viewed, their interest was raised. I mean, perhaps the individual who created this note could then be traced if fingerprints, DNA, were evident. It could be useful, as they seem to have some knowledge of what might have happened to the Beaumont children. Another opportunity so far has been lost. Which now brings into question the purse. This same detective informed me that he visited Elizabeth Phipps, Harry's second wife, after I had alerted him that I had spotted a small clip purse in the basement several years ago, when I visited the Phipps family home, which you can read about in detail in chapter 25, The Purse. But I was told by this detective that she'd thrown the purse out that I'd spotted in the basement. Now we must ask, did she throw this purse out, or did this detective take the purse and he told me she had thrown it out? We are unfortunately compelled to ask these questions. Bill and I also presented copies of Hayden Phipps' recorded interview and statement analysis report to Major Crime, plus a compiled dossier, as you can see here. Do they still have these items, or have they also been lost or discarded? Also, it was apparently alleged by Elizabeth Phipps, the former wife of Harry, that I had gained entrance to her home by impersonating a police officer. However, I informed a detective now on the case who had spoken to Elizabeth that I was introduced to her by one of the former senior Castleloy senior managers at the factory. Also, Elizabeth appeared to have a memory block when it came to being any satin dresses in the house. Now, even though Elizabeth Phipps does not appear to have been truthful to this detective, in fact, she has blatantly lied about my attendance at her home, this attempted deception did not appear to faze the officer, who appears to accept they were being lied to. To others, it raised red flags. Also, did Major Crime meet and interview the two sets of couples that took out the loads of satin from Harry's house?
Computer says no.
Now, did any Major Crime detectives meet and interview the couple that worked at the private gentlemen's club where the men dressed as women, including Harry Phipps, who they recognised? Now, again, I must say, dressing up in women's clothing, that's okay, knock yourself out. However, if that encroaches on a minor's personal space, then that is something very different. Did detectives at Major Crime meet and speak to Hayden's closest cousin Peter, who knew of the incredible amount of satin dresses in the house, Harry handing out and tipping him pound notes in the 1960s? Yep, you could be right.
Computer says no.
And if Peter was aware of Hayden's alleged sexual abuse at the hands of Harry, it could be that the rest of the Phipps family and extended family were likely to know also. Now, also have detectives met and interviewed some former senior managers at the Castleloy factory that I had met and spoken to many years ago. Now, managers who spoke of Harry's physical appearance in the 1960s, which closely matched the man seen with the children that fateful day at Collie Reserve, his tipping generosity, usually in pound notes, and that Hayden hated his father with a passion where they could not put this down to a workplace issue, and in their opinion, something else was going on at home, but they weren't quite sure what. And that the marriage between Harry and his first wife, Olga Phipps, was frosty, distant and lacking affection, again in their opinion. Now also has Major Crime made any wholehearted attempt to meet Linda, who says she was allegedly sexually abused by Harry Phipps when she was a 13-year-old schoolgirl across from his Castleloy factory in 1973. As there she was for all the world to see on Channel 7, the Beaumont Children, What Really Happened. You can now see that in its entirety without the commercials on YouTube.
My best friend lived around the corner from behind Castleloy's, and I remember having my school uniform on, which back then was very short, as they were back then, and I ran to my friend's place. This would have been about 4 o'clock when I headed her place, and she only lived not even a 3-minute run to her place.
Now, in fairness, a senior detective did approach Bill Hayes before the second dig in early 2018, and he asked could he meet and speak to her. Bill said she did not wish to speak to police due to the way she was treated many years ago by police when she reported her alleged sexual abuse by Phipps. Now, in my opinion, if I was this detective, I may have given this time to breathe and diplomatically tried again through Bill. Maybe even apologised for past police inaction. But I tell you, if I was him, I would be walking across hot coals to speak to Linda and use Bill as a conduit. And here you have, now well beyond any reasonable doubt, that Harry Phipps was highly likely a pedophile or a serial predatory pedophile and lived undetected for decades 190 metres from Collie Reserve and handed out pound notes and did fit the description of the man seen playing with the children that day at the beach. And do remember the pound note that children received at Collie Reserve. Remember the pound note that the boys were paid 3 days after the children went missing, when they were digging, in their opinion, a grave-sized hole. What were they paid in? Pound notes. Follow the money. Now, the circumstantial evidence that we compiled against Harry Phipps is hitting you across the head, and Major Crime Investigation Branch stand there seemingly oblivious to the facts. I mean, how long can you take this before common sense prevails and egos are parked to one side for the sake of the Beaumont family? The head of Major Crime says they will do everything humanly possible to bring these kids home. Then what are you waiting for? Overall, a thorough investigation, we call on that. Now, Bill and I believe the above mentioned is only the tip of the iceberg regarding what we believe was Major Crime's investigation, and as mentioned previously, is further detailed in the soon-to-be released Unmasking the Killer of the Missing Beaumont Children, Chapter 26, The Police Investigation. Bill and I believe that after reading, you'll be as gobsmacked as much as we are. Also, and very important, when police are investigating any crime or offence, be it an abduction, a murder, down to a simple traffic violation, the public need to be assured that the police will be unbiased in their collection of evidence in the case. They are expected to lack partisanship or even perceived prejudice in their investigation. They, like any business person, are expected to avoid any possibility of conflict of interest occurring or being alleged that occur when an investigating police officer has a friendship or family connection to someone involved in the investigation, be they the perpetrator or the witness. We ask Major Crime Investigation Branch, are they able to assure the South Australian public or the public in general that this is the case with their investigation into Harry Phipps and his alleged involvement into the abduction and disappearance of the missing Beaumont children? Or has there been a conflict of interest occurring? Have they ensured that the investigating police in this Beaumont case have no personal connection with any of the Phipps family members, former members and associates that might appear to the casual observer to be a conflict of interest? Also, Bill and I have asked why Harry Phipps has been elevated to a person of interest in this case if, as we say, this is a botched investigation. Well, there are several reasons for that. The sheer amount of circumstantial evidence pointing at Phipps as being the abductor of the Beaumont children, the hole dug at the Castelloy factory a mere 3 days after the abduction and disappearance of the children that was located on the site. Also, the quality of geophysical survey as advised above, and the information provided to police by the archaeologist Ian Moffat that conducted the survey. Also, the reputations and support for this case by people like Dr. Xanthi Mallet, arguably Australia's #1 criminologist, and others that spoke with police and pressed the case to them. The intervention of police decision makers, Detective Superintendent Des Bray, the officer commanding Major Crime Investigation Branch, and the inclusion of a new second in command of Major Crime Investigation Branch, Detective Inspector Greg Hutchins, both highly experienced, respected and pragmatic investigators. They had met with Dr. Mallet and archaeologist Ian Moffat from the Flinders University, Adelaide. A change in the cold case investigators may well have played a part in the change of attitude to the information too, but that is only speculation on our part. So again, if the head of Major Crime says they will do everything humanly possible to bring these kids home, then what are you waiting for? Go back through the boxes of statements taken, especially from that fateful day, with a fine-tooth comb, and now with the benefit of hindsight ask, are there any further descriptions of the man? The colour of his trousers, his shirt? Did he wear a belt, and if so, the colour? Was there any distinguishing buckle? It does not appear this man came to Collie Reserve with car keys and a wallet. Are there any witnesses to indicate that this may be otherwise? If none, then this man apparently travelled very light. Could he be a local? Also, he carried a towel. What colour and design? Were there shoes, sandals or flip-flops spotted? If they were, what colour? Did any of the eyewitnesses spot him swimming? Are there any interviews carried out by the initial detectives on this case with the eyewitnesses that indicate any of them saw this man initially coming to Collie Reserve from a certain direction before he laid his towel down? If so, what direction was he coming from? Also, when the man with Jane, Anna and Grant all left the change rooms together, are there any statements taken which may indicate the direction they all may have initially walked? As all we know right now is they were not seen walking back along Collie Reserve. Why not go back through these boxes of statements with a fine-tooth comb? Not only the answers to these queries above may well be hidden and ready to be discovered in these boxes, Bill and I quote Mostyn Matters, the last remaining detective alive that was present at the station that fateful day, January 26, 1966. He says, "We really didn't know what we were looking for." Now, with an in-depth understanding now of geographic and predator profiling, together with an overwhelming amount of circumstantial evidence and clues missed, all meticulously detailed in individual chapters in the upcoming book, we do know now what we are looking for. However, myself and Bill will leave you with the words of Ken Thorson, rest in peace, retired and former head of Major Crime Squad in the 1980s, who commented after reading and personally discussing some of the information regarding Harry Phipps, "This material has red flags all over it. Let's shake the tree and see what falls out." Also, Terence G. Lichtenwald, PhD, licensed clinical and criminal psychologist, forensic examiner, Illinois, USA. This pedophile predator is the primary suspect in the disappearance of the Beaumont children. I think anyone considering a career in law enforcement should read this book, and the seasoned law enforcement professional will have a copy in their professional library. An excellent read indeed, and highly recommendable. Well, that's about it for now. In the meantime, if you wish to find out the truth like myself and Bill, click the links below, like and subscribe. So until next time, I'm Stuart Mullins with Bill Hayes. We really enjoyed your company.